Hi, and welcome back to Honest Christian Girl. I'm Chloe Mack, and today is going to be bananas. Now, I've been seeing a lot of conversation online recently about social media, dopamine, addiction, and it's been such a fascinating conversation. But I'm not really seeing the church talk about it, and I think it's really relevant right now. Not to mention, we have so much to add to this conversation on a spiritual end. Quick disclaimer, right now I'm getting my master's in Christian counseling. I'm no expert. I am not Dr. Phil. I am not a licensed psychologist by any means. I've read a lot of books and am sitting under some awesome professors. So I will be linking all of my resources and the YouTube description below. Let's get into it. We are in a mental health crisis. 41% of Gen Z has been diagnosed clinically with a mental illness. 90% of that 41% is anxiety, and right behind that is depression. What on earth is going on? You hear these numbers, and maybe you're like me, and you're like, Chloe, it's just because Gen Z likes to talk more about their problem. People have always had this type of mental illness, but the thing is, we're seeing this uptick in hospital visits, from suicide attempts, self-mutilation, and panic attacks. Something actually is going on. We're truly in a crisis. Now, throughout history, we kind of see that there are these epidemic-like waves of mental illnesses. Right now, we're seeing one with anxiety and depression. Surprisingly, no other mental health issues are on the rise as much as anxiety and depression. So it begs the question, is there something societally going on that is aiding anxiety and depression? I think there is. In 2011 and 12 is when we see this really start to take off. And what was happening then? We were all getting iPhones. Middle schoolers were getting iPhones and being exposed to social media. Social media. Is it all evil? I don't think so. I'm on it right now. And for me, it's my place of outreach because I don't think all of Gen Z is going to walk into the church, but they are going to scroll and they might see me. There is a dark side to social media. We've all had this feeling of overindulgence when we scroll. Like I'll be laying in bed and scrolling endlessly throughout the night. To avoid my feelings, I'll just scroll and scroll and scroll until I get the TikTok guy that pops up and tells me to go to bed, and then I'll just keep on scrolling. Or I've scrolled in the morning thinking it would only be a minute, and it just absolutely took over my time, and I didn't even get to have Jesus time because I spent it all scrolling. And I've never honestly left social media feeling inspired. I typically feel like I've wasted my time. I shouldn't have done that. I have things to be doing. So why do I keep scrolling? I think it's because of dopamine. Now, what is dopamine? I'm going to read you from my resources. Contrary to popular misconception, dopamine isn't the happy chemical that releases when you receive something pleasurable. It's the chemical that motivates you to seek out pleasure. Studies have shown this chemical is largely responsible for overindulgence because it drives you to continually seek out pleasurable activities. Some of the highest dopamine-driven activities include gambling, shopping, sex, cocaine, and methamphetamines. However, not all high dopamine activities are the same for everyone. Some may be milder, like sugar, video games, and social media. I want to read this as well. Companies use dopamine to steal your focus. As a consumer, your attention equals money. So companies like TikTok and Instagram are constantly competing for that attention. As you scroll through social media, the anticipation of receiving likes and comments and of other forms of social validation activates the reward centers in your brain, releasing dopamine. When you receive positive feedback, your brain associates that experience with pleasure and reinforces you to seek out more. Have you ever experienced the dopamine hit from successful social media posts? It doesn't necessarily mean likes and comments, but it does help. When you get a lot of likes and comments, it feels crazy awesome, especially if you have a need for validation. You're starting to get all this validation. You're finally gorgeous. You're finally cool. You've been that person all along, but you just didn't know it, and now you're finally knowing it, and it feels amazing. Or maybe you've gone viral. Let me tell you, the second you go viral, all you think about is how can I go viral again? It happens when we overindulge in pleasure-seeking activities. That dopamine threshold only grows more and more, and so we start to experience withdrawals, like anxiety, irritability, like compulsively picking up your phone. Have you ever tried to get rid of social media and you found another app to become your social media, like a recipe app, and you're like reading every comment and you're like, what's happened to me? I'm a crazy crazy person. Or you like pick up your phone every couple minutes and you're like, why am I doing that? I'm a robot. This is super interesting, but the more society is industrialized, the more opportunity we have to overindulge. And studies have kind of shown that there's this Goldilocks zone of free time. If you have less than 2 hours of free time a day, you're unhappy. But if you have more than 5 hours a day, you're also unhappy. Somewhere between 2 and 5 hours is the sweet spot. Using excessive free time wisely will make us more happier, like growing in meaningful hobbies or our talents and skills, socializing with people when we spend all of our free time on social media where we feel unproductive and like we suck. Now listen, I don't think dopamine is the only reason that anxiety is being increased from social media. I also think that comparison is a massive factor, especially for women. I'm telling you, I never used to struggle with comparison. I'm telling the total truth. But as I become more involved on social media, I have struggled with comparison and had to delete apps because I found myself scrolling on TikTok, especially TikTok. And all of these influencers are gorgeous, like stunning. They're getting clothing hauls. They're just doing so many cool things. And I would look at them and be like, why can't I look like that? And I'd give my best effort to have that clean girl look or whatever it is. And I'm still not looking like them. And I'm not taking into account the fact that so many of those influencers, even though they're in their early 20s, already have facial fillers, lip fillers, crazy surgeries, and then on top of that, filters. And it's absolutely unrealistic, but we find ourselves in comparison. It literally got to a point for me where it was a non-negotiable, like I'm gonna get Botox, I'm gonna get lip filler. And I asked myself the question, like, what am I doing? I'm not saying those things are wrong. That's for a whole nother podcast. But to need them to feel beautiful is pretty toxic. Now, I'm a millennial, I'm admitting that. When I was younger, to avoid the beauty standards of this day, all you had to do is at the grocery store checkout line, not look at the magazines. That's it. Now today, it is so in your face, it is much harder to avoid. It's not just comparison of beauty standards. It's what you should buy, how your house should look, which leads me to FOMO. FOMO is the other thing with social media that really affects people. It makes them feel like they're missing out on something. I used to think it's like my friends are going bowling and they didn't invite me. Now I have fear of missing out. But it's more like you're looking at other people's lives and you're like, why am I not at a certain place in my life? Or why don't I have a handle on this or that? For example, I make my Honest Christian Girl vlogs. You guys maybe have seen them. Here's the truth behind the scenes. I finished my time with Jesus. Then I record that vlog and it takes me about 10 minutes of setting up my camera, clipping it, doing, my get ready with me, clipping it. That's not actually my time with the Lord. And in the same way, you kind of wonder, are all these 5 a.m. queens really awake at 5 a.m.? And how do they have so much time to film themselves? Or are they creating it at a whole nother time of day? We don't know. We find ourselves thinking we should be further along in life, or maybe it's the success of money that you see on social media. People having really nice stuff. You know what you don't see on social media is the kingdom culture of like Jesus calling us away from the American dream and that being praised. Social media is probably not going to fuel your fire to live more simply, live more radically. It's going to make you want things that you're not even designed to have. Now you're like super bored in this podcast. Like, Chloe, I know I'm addicted. What do I do about it? I don't think we're supposed to go cold turkey. Dr. Limke has this example about how this guy came into her practice super depressed, and she evaluated his life and saw that he was addicted to video games. And instead of giving him depression medication, she told him, hey, get off the video games for 4 weeks and come back to me. And when he came back 4 weeks later, the guy was totally changed, in joy, said he never had more focus and vision for his life. And guess what? He was actually able to get back to video games, doing it in moderation, keeping dopamine in check and keeping his life goals in check. So I think there is a way to have moderation, but it takes willpower. And it might take a little bit of detox, where they say the sweet spot is 4 weeks, where you kind of distance yourself, get rebalanced, and then jump back in. Setting new goals and habits might work for a little bit, but I think the deeper question is to ask ourselves what kind of person we want to be. Like, I want to be a focused and present woman, or I want to experience life around me, or I want to be a woman of spiritual authority. Can I just say, no matter how perfect your algorithm is, you're going to see junk on social media. You're probably going to run into soft porn. You're probably going to run into a bazillion cuss words or a sexual joke. And I don't know, I just kind of struggle with that. Like, I want to have spiritual authority in my life. Do I really need to be filling myself with junk? Is it really worth it? Or I want to be a woman that doesn't rely on the praise of man to find my identity. So ask yourself what kind of person you want to be. I think another question to ask yourself is, are you making your addiction too easy? Like, is your phone in your bed or at your side table? Why not put it in a drawer and order an alarm clock so you don't scroll at night and don't scroll in the morning? Or set a time limit that only a friend knows. Or if you struggle with pornography, go to Walmart, buy a flip phone. And then I think ask yourself the most exciting question is, if I had more free time, what would I want to invest in? What skills do I want to grow in? Did you know that the dopamine you get from pain is a more enduring type than the dopamine you get from pleasure, like from working out, ice baths? Like, how biblical is that when Jesus is like, if you lose your life, you will find it, or to live is Christ, to die is gain. I think Jesus was hinting at, do hard things. You're going to be more fulfilled. Serve, do things with your hands, invest in skills and hobbies that have to do with your calling and excite you. I close with this. We're all on this journey together. I in no means am an expert. I'm just starting my new habits, and we're going to see how it turns out in the next 4 weeks, and I'll check back in with you. I want to go back to the top of this. If you struggle with an anxiety or depression, there is hope for you, and I know there's healing because I've experienced myself. And I want to encourage you to throw every practical tool you can alongside the power of Jesus, alongside good guidance in your life, to live in joy and live in purpose. This is not the end of the story. I want to thank you for tuning in, and I will see you guys next week. Bye.